Brought to you by Knights of Awakening. This is the Labyrinth. This is going to be an interesting little show. It's going to be a pagan's view of Christianity. I've had some comments on the previous demonic summoning and communications interview with the demon video. And I really wanted to hit on why Pagan reviews things the way we do, why Heathen reviews it. But I got to start with a little bit of a story first, because I tried to do this story, about a year ago, and Facebook ate the video. And now I'm going to try to do it on YouTube here, because YouTube generally doesn't eat the video because it gets recorded right here, instead of trying to do the whole live streaming bullcrap explosion thing. So the first part of this video has to be, what brought me to paganry. And some of it has been in my blood since I was a very young man. Some of it is kind of hard to believe, too, if you don't know me well enough to know my background and know the honesty of what I say, and you haven't seen some of the things that I've dealt with in my life and how it's always worked out the way it has. So, we got to rewind, I guess, to the beginning. I was born. I was born to a Christian family. My mother was very devoutly Christian in belief in God, but she also believed in supernatural and willpower, psychic energy, things of that nature. So I had a little bit of that mixed in there too. I died when I was 2 or 3. I drowned to death for a few minutes. No lung activity, and the heart may have stopped. That's iffy. My mother pumped the water out of my lungs. It was something that I don't remember very well. And then when I was 3 or 4-ish, I guess, still within the age of 1 or 2, somewhere around there, I suffered a bout of paralysis of my legs. And my mother prayed daily, but she did more than just pray. She took action, and she worked my legs until they worked again. Right there, a lot of people say, well, you should thank God. I do, mine. And I'll get into that in a minute. So I believed in God. A lot. More than most of you ever would. And you're going to say, how dare you say that? Well, no, when I was young, I believed in God enough that I would let someone beat on me, and I prayed to God to intervene. Not even kidding there. A lot of people will say, well, that's foolish, you were young, you didn't know any better, and that's kind of the thing, isn't it? If you pray to God and it doesn't work, then you got to wonder if He's listening. Whereas if you pray to God and it does work, you got to wonder why it works for you and not for others. And in my case, praying to another God does work. This Jehovah, the Christian God, Jesus, nothing. Which I want to really touch on next. I was very devout. I believed. I had faith. And even when I was young, when I would get into fights, I'd pray to God to end the fight peacefully, and it wouldn't happen. And I remember distinctly, and my mother remembered it enough to tell me about it later. She says, I was really moved but really shocked when you were getting beat up. I went to intervene and I stopped because I seen you were praying and I didn't know what to do. Should I step in? Should I let you learn on your own? If I handle your fights for you, what will you grow up to be as a man? She had told me that at one point. That's why she didn't intervene whenever I was in a fight in the backyard. Because if you fight other people's fights, then they grow up weak. I grew up strong in my own ways and weak in others. So I prayed, nothing. God did not descend from the heavens. The children did not take mercy upon my soul. They beat on me harder and said, look at him, he's praying. And I stood up and said, well, if God won't help me, I'll help myself. And I proceeded to punch one of them hard enough to knock him straight to the ground. And that kind of ended it because, at a young age, kids are highly impressionable in the sense that they don't like getting hit in the nose. And you don't get into really enjoying that till you get older, like, where I'm at now. Gotta love a good boxing match when you have the chance to partake. But I was young. That was one of my first encounters with the lack of God. And it got worse as time went on. I prayed, but I never felt connection. I went to Jesus, I never felt connection. I tried prayers from the Bible, I tried my own prayers. I sat in prayer hours at a time. Never felt anything. One day, we were taking apart a couch. And this may not be something normal for most people. I realize that I didn't grow up in a normal household. Most of you, I guess you don't take apart couches and throw them away piece at a time. You get a truck and haul them to the dump. Well, we were very frugal. We weren't poor. My father made good money. He was a mechanic. He made very good money, in fact. But we liked to save what we could. So we'd tear the cushions up and cut them in, put them in the bags. When they would have what was called a big trash night, where you were allowed to put as many bags out as you want. And we would break down the boards and put those in the bags. The problem with breaking down a couch's boards is they're very sturdy 2x4s, even thicker sometimes. My father was trying to snap one of these in half with a hammer, and he was failing. I said, "Can I try?" And he says, "Well, you're not going to do any better. I'm twice your size." I want to say somewhere between 7 and 10. And the reason I say I want to say that is because I'm in my late 30s now. I don't remember the exact age. I didn't read comic books. I didn't watch any movies that had Thor in them. He wasn't really in the mythology section of the encyclopedia. I was very interested in Hercules and Zeus and those gods. But something always seemed a little off. They seemed like fictional references, or, really they felt more like people that were there, but they weren't mine. Without knowing anything of Thor, without any reference that should have given me an understanding, I raised the hammer to the sky, and I said, "In the name of Thor, give me strength." And I came down with the hammer with such incredible force that I split the 2x4 in half. Almost went into the concrete underneath of it. Wasn't allowed to hold a hammer after that. I didn't hold a hammer again until I was 18. Not for any substantial jobs or workings, especially not to tear anything apart. My parents were a little shocked by that, my mother especially. She knew of other gods. She knew of magic. She was a pretty well-read person, but she wasn't into magic. She preferred concepts like ESP and psychic energy and things like that. She felt that they fit her paradigm better. So I was very quickly removed of hammer. I was asked, "How did I know that name?" "I don't know how I knew that name." "How do you know your own name?" And proceeded to continue about my life, continuing to pray to God, who didn't answer, try to get closer to God, who I couldn't get closer to connect to this God. And I say God like that because truth is, calling him God is pretentious. It's presumptuous. That'd be like me calling myself God. Inside my own home, I'm a god. For all intents and purposes, I have dominion. What I say goes. What I say is going to happen, happens. What I say won't happen, won't happen. I don't call myself God. So, maybe we should call him Jehovah, or Yahweh, or whatever you want to call him. The God of the Christians, God of Abraham, we'll call him. Okay, so the God of Abraham, hey, that's a more truthful statement. No connection. Prayers to Jesus day and night. I was the only one who said meal prayers in the house. My father was not big on that. And him and I never really connected much, so I can't say that he had an influence on who I became in this. He would have found as little love for Thor as I do for Jehovah. So, that continued. I got older. I realized that I could do things other people couldn't always. I would get glimpses of the future. I could sit down and sense answers to tests. A lot of little things. A good example being when I was younger, I had a plate fall on my head, and I actually stepped on my body and watched it falling when I sensed the danger. I guess I projected backward through time and warned myself on a level. And I watched the plate fall, hit on my head, and shatter. And then I was back in my body, and for a moment I was stunned, unaware of how I'd done that. So, I was gifted in the mystical areas and the basic areas of what I call being gifted in those. For people that aren't gifted, it doesn't matter if you're really that gifted. I find hard work and determination beats out, natural ability 9 out of 10 times. 10 out of 10 times even. You know what? Natural ability without the effort put in. And what it boils down to is a person who puts in 5% more effort is going to do better than someone who's 100% more gifted. So, end of the day, being gifted isn't the point, except that it shows that I was going to have an interest in how this worked soon. And I did. My father left, 15 now? Moved to Florida. I was in Maryland at the time. I'm in Florida now. I've come home to my birth state. But he moved, and I wanted vengeance. Did not have any interest in the Christian concept of forgiveness at this point. God had done nothing up to this point. He had sat back and watched. He didn't heal my heart. He didn't remove the burden of the pain. He didn't provide any guidance. Oh, I prayed. I prayed day and night. So I studied the basics of magic and curse work. I found out that karma is more or less a social construct. Cool. You can manipulate social constructs. I read a lot on chaos magic for about a month while he was gone. And said, okay, I can do this. So at the ripe old age of 15, it's 14 or 15, I did my first curse. And it worked really well. He was hit with a multiple heart attack. Went to the doctors. Had a change of heart. Me and my mother talked about it. She wanted to bring him back because she believed in forgiveness. Save me from the Christians. She believed in forgiveness. And, yeah, we brought him back. My statement to her was that you can't stop the inevitable in this world. Bringing him back delays an unstoppable event. And I was right. I usually am when I kind of foresee the future. So, by the time I was 17, he left again. He went back down to Florida. We were in Maryland. We were in a much worse position financially and socially. We had to move from our home, the home that I had been in since I was 4, so a home of 11 years, to my grandmother's old home. And there, I began to study magic in more detail. I had 3 years to come to terms with what I had done. I said, okay, that was neat. Looks like, God still isn't influencing things. I hadn't become pagan yet. Understand, I believed that I was Christian. I believed I was acting as a force of justice at this point. And I believed that God did not limit one from doing magic, because in the Bible it even says, all these things I do, you shall do, and greater. It's Jesus there for you. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I think all have him say that at some point if you read the Bible, which you might, if you're a Christian watching this, and if you're a pagan, you probably read it in great detail. So, he leaves again, and I say, you know what? I can do this. I hit him again. He has another major heart attack. This time he doesn't come back. He stays down here, there. I was north then, so I'm south now. So anyway, he takes the hit, and we run into a person we rent the old place to. So they said they'll fix it up if we rent it to them, since we couldn't afford to stay there. So we do that to then pay for the mortgage that's still on that house. And in that, I get a very, very bad feeling from this person. And this was something of understanding the nature of the universe that I hadn't come to yet. I wasn't trusting my instincts. And for someone who is in the greater current, that is dangerous. I don't know that the person that we had associated with was any part of my mother's death, but I felt them try to draw energy from me, and they died shortly after that, and my mother died shortly before they did. So within a month or so, I was there. The magic that I had learned was not sufficient to save a life yet. It just wasn't there. I was 18 now. And I guess my father would have left when I was 18 then, so I was going to be turning 19 on June. So, to amend that. None of the magic was enough to save her, and prayers to God went on, obviously, deaf ears. She died. mostly died in my arms. She actually passed on the road out from my house, and I felt her spirit go up, out, and into everything, which is not the same as going to a heaven. And I gained a very clear awakening of how the spiritual world worked at that point, and what my own natural gifts were, and how I was honing them. I understand I had a lot more to learn, but more importantly, a lot more training to do. Power is definitely a viable road in any situation. She dies. I am thrust into the world upon my own. Remember I said I grew up strong, but also weak? I didn't know how to do a lot of basic things on my own. I didn't know anything about paying bills. I didn't know about holding down a job or paying rent or anything. I had some people that were sort of friends. Not going to get into the details. That will just say that things went south years later. But at the time they were friends. They helped me get an understanding of what I was doing. And I began on the great course of bettering myself. I was in college for a semester, and I picked up one of the local books they had on magic and started reading it out of curiosity. So I was getting more and more into this art form and learning more and more about it, because at the time I believed that if power was there, God obviously wanted me to use it. Not necessarily your God, but a God. And at the time I thought it was, we both had the same God. You, if you're a Christian watching this, if you're pagan watching this, it may be your God. Have you heard the good word of Thor? Or Odin? If so, then more than likely, it's your God. Point being, some study and research, I started moving towards paganry. I practiced what I called Christian mysticism for about a year or two. And then I realized it didn't resonate with me. And God says, turn the other cheek. Odin says, turn the other cheek with your axe. You hit them hard enough. Take that cheek. You just hit right across. You take that cheek and turn it. Could definitely get more behind that message. But moreover, as I started working with Thor, I felt whole and true and right. I felt complete. You know that love that everyone was talking about that I was supposed to feel from Jehovah? Never got it. Emptiness. If anything, like a void sucking at my chest. But with Thor and with Odin, with the other gods, I felt that. It was startling. I considered myself a good person. Christian good, pagan bad. Very startling. Very, very difficult to fully comprehend. Going through a dark time, too. My mother had died. Actually, I should say I was a Christian mystic for about a year. I said 2 years, probably 6 months to a year at that point. It didn't last as long as I might think. Thinking back on the time frame, people that I met kind of frames it for me a little better. So this story is necessary for you to understand what comes next in it. So this is not just me telling you my life story. To give you the view that a heathen or a pagan has of Christianity, you've got to understand the road I walked on it, because I can't give you every pagan and heathen's view. But I can give you mine. And this isn't putting any Christians down. I have a great love for my friends that are Christians and that believe in their God fully. I believe in your God too. I don't believe he's better than mine. I don't believe he's all-powerful. And that's what I'm going to be getting into in a minute. See, the other thing that fell into this was logic. Pagans describe their gods as powerful beings, but not all-powerful. Beings with rules that they have to follow, with limits to their attention and knowledge, with areas that they specialize in, and yet vast power within those areas. A great woodworker can make a shield, can make a table, can make a dresser, can make a hat rack, can make many, many things out of wood. And yet they're not all powerful. They may appear to be all powerful in the area of making wood objects. So, That's a big difference, and that was something that started weighing on me, and that's what started between that and the fulfillment I felt. You know, even just speaking of Thor and the gods right now, my heart lifts. I have to kind of stop myself from smiling like an idiot. But from Jehovah, I felt nothing. It's important that you understand that dividing point, because a lot of people try to blame tragedy and things like that, but even in the best of times, I felt nothing. Even in the worst of the times, I still feel my gods. So, now I can get in. Now you know who I am, why I'm here talking on this. Had a lot of comments on our videos, especially from Christians. I thought you should understand how we, meaning me, but I'm sure other pagans will agree with me, view you and your God. Overly powerful and cruel child would be the first thing for the God, not necessarily for you. Most of you are very reserved, very good sheep. And that's good. That's what is asked of you. Your God says, be his sheep. Okay, you're a sheep. Fantastic. We don't respect that. Pagans don't. Heathens don't. Especially heathens. Heathen is Norse pagan, so you know. Heathens don't respect that. We don't. We have nothing for it. You know, your God wants you to be sheep, and we're like, okay, our gods want us to be strong. They want us to prove something to ourselves, to them, to the world. They want us to live and embody who we are. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's why we have gods like Loki for those that have to be tricky and cruel. We have gods like Odin, who is very much about being who he is and getting what he wants out of things. We have gods like Thor, who are very compassionate and kind, and yet very brutal and angry. It's kind of like, be on Thor's good side, and you're good. And don't be on his good side, and he's very specific on how he'll deal with that. Sort of. See, this is the thing. Your God is supposed to be a God of forgiveness, and he doesn't forgive all that easily. He slays the firstborns in all of Egypt. I never got over that story. What a horrifying thing for a child to read. Meanwhile, in the story of Thor, one of the stories at least, he stumbles across a farmer's home, and in the story, it comes to pass that his goat is injured by means of the father's actions. I'm not going to get into all of it, the details, but it has to do with life and rebirth, and in it, the father of the farm family makes a mistake, and Thor's goat is mortally wounded so that it will never walk properly again, and Thor has a fit of rage. Then, realizing that he scared these people, calms himself. So let's just use this story as a contrast. You've angered God, Jehovah, so he shall now slay all the firstborns. Wow! You've angered Thor, so he shall yell and scream and hit things with his hammer and then stop himself before anyone gets hurt and go, all right, you are very small and I am very vast. So I'm going to do something to make this right for both of us, because it falls on me for being strong to make this right. I don't know if you can see the contrast and why a heathen would have issue with the nature of your God. Don't get me wrong, there are things you can do to get Thor to punish you, to get him to show wrath, but you got to do more than mess up. You got to do a lot more. You got to go toe-to-toe after him. So, this is the contrast, and what he does to make it right. In those days, you could take someone's children as a payment for an action. That sounds so barbaric. Read your Bible. To make this right, he takes the farmer's children. He says, they will be with me, your son and your daughter. They will be like gods. I will elevate them. They will gain some of my essence, and as the legends grow of me, they will grow of them. They will help carry what my one remaining goat cannot on its own. They will learn from me. They will grow with me. your family will be known in legend as I am known. In this, I don't lose my ability to travel the world and do good things as a god. And in this, no one dies, your children are not harmed, you are not harmed, you benefit. Well, the family was ecstatic. Modern day, we shelter our children and we protect them from everything, including doing well and growing strong and winning. We protect them from winning by evening out a playing field. So this may be hard for you, if you're a person of the modern day, to understand the graciousness of this gift. The heartfelt love that is shown towards those lesser than him. That's a god. That's not an overly powerful, spoiled child. Overly powerful, spoiled children play games with people. Like in the story of Job. I don't know if you've read your Bible. The story of Job is another one. Why do you tell these things to children? No wonder Christianity is losing membership. We read the stories and we go, ah! The story of Job is about a man who loved God so much that nothing could change his mind. I identify with this guy. I was like that at one point. Even not feeling God's love, I still believed. Until I, felt the difference. Story of Job, God and the devil play dice as to whether or not Job will scorn God's name. What I mean by that is, they believe that there's a chance. The devil says there's a chance I can make it happen. And Jehovah says, nah, you ain't that good. Do it, though. Do it. I want to see what happens. How cruel do you have to be when you have someone that loves you so much that you would let another person torture them to prove that love? God's a sadist. Your God's a sadist. Jehovah is, let's look at Odin. Odin's cruel. Odin is known as Oathbreaker, Glad-O-War. He's got more names and titles than any other god that I know of. Knowing that all things begin and all things end. Wanting to reduce the repercussions of that in the world. Looking at the Ragnarok, Odin goes and makes a deal with Loki to get advice on how to deal with this, to help prevent things from happening. Odin sacrifices himself for knowledge so that he can deal with this. Those who worship Odin, and those who want to go to Valhalla, that's only for warriors. That's not for you and me. You gotta really love fighting, but why wouldn't you put people that are that berserker crazed in their own hall? They can do what they love, while everyone else can, eat fine wine and cheese and bread and meat and enjoy Helheim, or wander the earth and watch after their ancestors or the people they love. Those are options in the Norse. It's not just heaven or hell. We do have places like hell, but you gotta be really bad to get there. You gotta be so bad that a guy with a name like Oathbreaker would be like, that's pretty bad. So you got paganry, which is very inclusive, very friendly, very, your gods are your gods, my gods are my gods, very loving, and who most of our gods are very moral, in a very real sense, very applicably moral to how they deal with their people, versus a God who is consistently cruel right up to the New Testament. And people say, well, the New Testament undoes everything of the Old. The New Testament changes the rules. The New Testament does away with some of the old laws. It changes the way the laws work. That's all fine and good, and it introduces a loving figure to take the place of Bastard, the god of death, and hate and pain and suffering, and with the sword and the fire and the hoo-ha. Yeah. But it doesn't change what he did. From a heathen perspective, your God is deplorable to me. I could not imagine worshiping a God as such. I would rather worship the Jotun, who at least take care of their own and do not do as such, and they are beings of chaos. I would rather worship the dwarves, who have great love of money and gem, and very little love of anything else except for their own people, who they take care of well. That's the pagan view. That's the heathen view. We look at your God and we see a cruel, overbearing, self-centered, egotistical a-hole who destroys anything he cannot control, demands love, and then punishes when he doesn't get it. And it's good for you to know that, because you see him as an all-loving father figure, which means that you're only seeing that aspect, and that's fine, and I get that you're going to hold on to that. You know, my gods are gods of death and war, but I also recognize that death and war are a part of life, and someone's got to have the job, and it's better be the guy winning than the guy losing. In the end, this difference in viewing your God, you know, you've been told yours is a God of love. Your Old Testament doesn't support that, but your New Testament, at least anything outside of Paul's writings, pretty much does. This contrast, you know, if your Christians viewed it as a separate God, like the Old Testament was one God, and they believed that another God existed, and that this other older God was a trickster, I might have remained Christian. I still wouldn't have felt the love, so I wouldn't have remained Christian. But many other heathens and pagans might. For the heathens and the pagans, this overbearing, all-powerful father figure who tortures, destroys, asks people to sacrifice their son, just see if they will, claims that he's unstoppable. That's the next point. Claims he's all-powerful. None of the pagan and heathen gods claim supreme power. Supreme power over an area? Maybe. They claim dominion within their realm over that area, just like I claim dominion over my home. But they don't claim all-powerful. So whenever they do something to gain power or to win in a situation, it makes sense. The Christian God claims to be all-powerful, and this is, oh shit, I can't do this without doing something else. I gotta do this thing to make this thing happen. Well, what do you mean? The only way I'm gonna get rid of all you jackasses is to flood the earth. It's just, I gotta do it. Why? You're God. Just, point. Make it happen. Or are you not God in the sense of the word you're using? See, are you a God? You got power? But you gotta make it happen through things? You gotta make it happen through people? Or are you God, as in you can just do stuff? See, the creation myths always make them sound so big. The creation myths are vast and glorious. Well, the Christian one is because it all springs out of nothing. In the Norse one, everything has a beginning, right up to the point where we don't know the beginning. It makes a little more sense. It's got to be carved out. It's got to be made into being out of things. And all understanding of magic and mysticism and the way the world works requires that understanding that things come from something else. That's like a basic tenet of science, too. For an all-powerful God, he's got to jump through a lot of hoops. And when he finally says, you know what, I've been looking at this. Some people say it's been 5,000 years. Some people say it's been 18 million years or billion years. But I've been a jackass. I gotta find a way to solve this. If he's all-powerful, all he has to do is step down, or send his angels to step down. Bring the message. Look, I was a dick. I'm done being a dick. I've had a change of heart. Y'all are doing the best you can. Good job. And then it's written. The scrolls get carried. He's God. He can make the scrolls get carried. If he's God. If he's a God, then he has limits to his power and his abilities. Limits that may seem impressive to us, but frankly put, require that he can't do certain things like break his own word easily. Mind you, Oathbreaker can break his own word easily. I don't know, Odin's a little bit... Odin's up here, Jehovah's... Anyway, my thoughts. You want the pagan view of Christianity? Well, this is your pagan view of Christianity. I got a God who can break his own word. You got a God to break his own word. He has to jump through 15 hoops, impregnate a woman without touching her, have that child come to be the savior of mankind and sacrifice itself so that God can change his mind. Really? that's what you're going to go with. That a sacrifice is needed so that God can change his mind. Well, he takes on the sin of the world. Why can't God just say, sin's done, it's over? I had a change of heart. I didn't want to see you suffer. New law, do your best, it's good enough. So long as you're really trying. But that's not what happens. That says to me this God has limits. Like a ceremonial high magician setting up a contract with the universe, pulling upon powers vast and arrayed, that once he creates that contract, he's bound to it, and it takes great sacrifice to break it. Your God sounds like a magician to me. And not a very good one. And that's how most heathens view it. That's how this heathen views it. And I'd say most pagans. This is what we come to understand. If you've made it through this far in the video and you're a Christian, let me explain a few last things. Number one, I don't hate you. I don't hate your God. Yes, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If I met your God in person, if I'm wrong and I die and I go to your judgment place and God is standing there, I'm going to hit him in the nose. Because I don't stand for bullying and cruelty or overly powerful petty children. I wouldn't be me if I didn't. So if there's still free will, assuming he doesn't make me disappear for the thought, the action will follow. And if I'm really quick, and he isn't all-powerful, maybe I'll get 2 swings in. I don't hate your God, though. And you may say, well, how could you say you said he hit him in the nose? No, I don't hate most people who do things that are terrible. Hate is not an emotion I harbor and hang on to. You got to really cross personal lines with me. And the firstborns of Egypt, I didn't know them, so it's not a personal line. I'd still do it just because someone's got to, and the right thing has to be done. Because right should be right without or with a God there to enforce it. That's the first part. I don't hate you. I don't hate your gods. For those of you who are following Christ and are focusing only on that, while I believe you are in a major contradiction between the first half of your holy paper and the second half of your holy paper. I don't have a problem with you. You generally are good people if you're really following it. You're going out and you're helping people less fortunate than you. You're trying to do the right thing. You're performing healing miracles through your faith. As a rule, you are trying to become more one with that concept of Christ. And you have accepted the contradiction that is your book. And while I cannot accept your contradiction, and I also don't feel the love that you are apparently feeling, if you're feeling that love, I'm all for what you're doing. And most pagans will be too. But don't think for one little moment that what you got's better than what I got. In terms of what you feel from it, what you're getting out of it. You may believe that you're in the right, and that's good, and I'm hopeful that you do. But it doesn't mean that I'm in the wrong from my perspective, and no amount of you believing it's going to make it so. See, this is the last part of this, is if you're a Christian, you made it all the way to this point, then let me say, I don't expect this to change your mind, and I don't expect you to see yourself as wrong, and I don't expect you to think that you'll make me see myself as wrong. What does kind of get, not really under my skin, but it gets my attention, is that I've got to continually reinforce to the Christian community that I am not one of you, and that there is nothing you will ever do to bring me to your God. It may be tied up and on a stake. And even then, if I were to die and go and meet him in his vast and glorious presence, and he said, what do you have to say for yourself? I would say, I was about to ask the same thing. Millions of innocent lives, torturing people that love you more than anyone. And then you throw a fit at the end of time to prove a point? What do you got to say for yourself? What kind of God are you? For a pagan, we see gods as being... Most pagans see gods as being gods of an attribute. God of war, God of life, God of death. And even then, most pagans see our gods like people who happen to fill a couple jobs here and there. So a god of war may also be a god of death, may also be a god of life. And we don't split it into these little subsections. That's a very Christian thing. It's a very Roman thing. I'm not a Roman. I'm not Greek. Most of your northern paganry, we don't split it so dead evenly. But we do, for the sake of it being easy in conversation, make that divide. One of our little contradictions. So, if my God is, God of fertility in the fields, that's Thor, God of war, God of protecting the common man, God of compassion, God of travel, God of the storm, what else? God of creation, because the hammer both creates and destroys, God of destruction. And he's all of these different things. What's your God? A God of creation, a God of destruction, God of judgment, God of anger, God of wrath, God of healing, God of rules, God of restrictions, God of pain, God of suffering, God of testing. I don't like gods of testing. I have nothing for them. And that's how most heathens are going to see this. I welcome you to love your God. But you really need to understand where we're coming from when you think you're going to convert us. You believe you have the truth. And we know you don't. The viewpoints that have just been expressed in this video in no way represent the whole of Knights of Awakening. Allie? I know you'll have a reply coming up eventually. Justin may even want to do a video on this at some point. Master Derek Thompson may want to do a video on this at some point. I don't know. I haven't seen him in a while. But these viewpoints do not express the viewpoints of all of the Knights of Awakening. I am one man. I am a Thorsman. I know what that means to me. I know how important it is to me. I also know that what I am is not what everyone else is going to be, but I think it's important for people to understand the viewpoints in these things. If you've had a problem with this video, I'm sure I'll see it. A lot. If you like this video, I may not see many comments on it or much information. Maybe I will. If you didn't like or dislike this video in any capacity, I probably won't know at all. But there are buttons to deal with these things. And there are keyboards and texting devices. And surely I'll find out if you care to express. And if you don't, well, I don't know. I'm no more all-knowing than the Christian God is. So I won't know then. I have limits to what I can do. That's all people do. But I ask that my gods be bigger than me, better than me. And I hope that you ask the same of your gods. But more than anything, I hope this makes you think. I hope this helps you, if you're Christian, tailor your message better. Maybe look at the people you're coming to and ask if it's even possible to convert them, or if you're wasting your time and their time, because time is the one thing we never get back. Even if you reincarnate or believe in all that, you don't get your time back. You get this shot once. If you're pagan and you never really thought about how you feel about Christianity, maybe this will give you something to think about. In any event, I'm hopeful that in some small way this helps you awaken the night within.